Welcome to the YourTown television program. I'm the host of the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation segment of this program. My name's Jeff Kline. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Dan Boger, who's the chairman of our Information Science Department, as well as the chair of our Cyber Academic Group. And Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to get to your responsibilities both as the Cyber Academic Group chair and as the Information Science Department chair. Talk about your faculty, talk about your research, all those sort of things. But first, let's get to know a little bit more about you.
Okay.
You are from North Carolina originally, and
That
then
is correct.
You're a Southern boy that went north to Rochester, New York to get your degree. What did you study there?
I studied management science. When I was a senior in high school, I got a bit of the wanderlust and decided that I would rather go elsewhere to school than stay in state. So a naval ROTC scholarship was available at Rochester, and I ended up going there on that ROTC scholarship.
Great. Well, now, for those people who don't know, management science is applied mathematics in the business of both management and operations. Is that
correct?
So
Correct.
it's the business form of operations research or analytics.
That's precisely what it was. There are a number of faculty that were there at that time and still are who are well known in the operations research community, but the problems that they typically use in instruction in the management science program were focused more on business than they were on operations.
So then, after your graduation, you came to NPS for a graduate degree. Usually officers go to sea for a couple years, maybe 4 or 6, or they're the Army, they come to the field. How is it that you came right from college right to the Naval Postgraduate School to get a graduate degree?
Well, actually, I had signed up for a special program when I was a senior at Rochester, and I was going to take a 2-year leave of absence before my active duty started, my payback for the ROTC scholarship.
Right.
And I had been admitted to the University of Chicago, and I was planning on going there in the fall of 1968, which was the year I graduated. I was home on spring break, and I got a telephone call from the Navy captain who was the professor of naval science there, and he said, I've got some bad news for you. The program that you signed up for no longer exists. So if you still want a graduate degree, the Navy will send you to the Naval Postgraduate School. And I said, well, tell me more. So I accepted those orders and went to NPS and really enjoyed it.
What did you study here?
It fundamentally was more management science. I took a number of OR courses from some of the faculty who were there at that time. Pete Zana, you may recall that name.
Yeah.
And a number of math courses, et cetera. So it was an interesting chance for me to sort of pursue what I was really interested in.
Great. Yeah. Well, but you couldn't dodge sea duty forever.
That's absolutely true.
So what happened after you graduated?
After I graduated, I was sent to an old Fram 1 destroyer. You may recall the phrase.
Well, I do, but that was an old destroyer that had been upgraded or put back together or pieced together almost from World War II, for crying out loud.
Yes, it was a World War II vessel, significantly upgraded in terms of communications, weapons, etc.
But still probably an engineering challenge.
It was, and I was sent there as DCA, and then...
I'm sorry, so we have to explain what a DCA is. It's the damage control assistant, and on a ship that's probably 30 or 40 years old, it's the hardest job probably that a junior officer can have.
It was quite challenging. Fortunately for me, however, the decision was made to start pulling that ship out of service. Mm-hmm. So after I'd been there for 6 months, I was then ordered to... what was then called a DLG, a large guided missile destroyer. And I spent 18 months aboard her and made a Mediterranean cruise and a few other things and really enjoyed that.
And they later transitioned to become our cruisers, I think.
Yes,
that
right?
is
correct.
Yeah, right.
That is correct.
So you spent your time in the Navy, and then you get out of the Navy, and what did you do when you did that?
Well, actually, I was in the middle of that med cruise when I received notification that Navy wanted me to go to Vietnam and serve it as an advisor.
Oh, okay. An
So
advisor to the South Vietnamese.
advisor to the South Vietnamese Navy,
right.
yes. So in executing those orders, they wanted me to learn language, Vietnamese, so I came to DLI here in Monterey and spent 9 months studying Vietnamese, and at that time I met my future wife.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. And after that 9 months and then a few more months of special training, I went to Vietnam, and I managed to be there during a leap year, so I got to stay for 366 days.
Instead of 365, right?
And as my payback tour,
Right.
since I had done pretty well as a student at NPS and had some friends on the faculty at that time, I asked if it would be okay for me to return to NPS as a military instructor,
Right.
which I did, and spent 2 years doing that before I resigned my commission and went to University of California at Berkeley, to work on my PhD.
And what did you do as a dissertation there?
Actually, I was able to get some funding from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to work on a transportation project.
Oh,
And my professor who was advising me on that fellowship said that, there's an area that hasn't had much analytic work, and that's the inland waterway system.
that's right.
So that's what I focused on for my dissertation. I was able to use a number of the statistical tools that I picked up whenever I got my MA in stat, also at Berkeley, and then finished up in 1979
In economics.
in economics,
Right.
with a PhD in economics. Right.
So how did we capture you to come to MPS as a civilian faculty?
Well, since I had been there as a military faculty several years before, when I started to look for a job, I called some of my faculty friends who were at NPS and said, I'm on the market. Are you guys looking for anyone? And I came down and gave a job talk, and fortunately I did have other offers, which I was able to reject, and it's been a great time for the last nearly 39 years
Well, that's,
as a civilian faculty member at NPS.
and as I was going to say, we're almost to the 40th year then. That's right,
That's
isn't it?
right.
When we are very fortunate to have had you for this long, and so is the Navy, and so is the other services, because information science, the chairman of that department, and the department you teach in, is a joint multi-service interdisciplinary type program. So tell us a little bit about your responsibilities as the information science chair, and tell us what information science is.
Well, I'll start with your second question.
Okay.
I define information sciences as really spanning the entire gamut from the creation to the processing all the way to the use, with a real emphasis on the use of information or data. There's a paradigm that exists that says that data is really lower level information, that once you have data, it has to be put into some sort of context before you can call it information. And that entire chain from generation through use is what we take a look at in information sciences in the information sciences department. And it goes all the way from technical aspects such as what are the technical details of setting up things like mesh networks. That's networks where nodes can come in and go out, et cetera, and that's very useful in an area that I'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
All the way through how commanders make decisions. And one of the areas that I personally have been interested in, especially since my Navy days and my days as an advisor in Vietnam, is command and control. Because the idea behind military command and control is that you want to give the commander, the decision maker, as much information as he possibly can absorb in order to make a decision and weigh risks more than anything else. That's what the decision making is about.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your C4I class, the one you teach, the command and control class. But answer this: we have so much information now. What you present, what's the common phrase is information overload.
Absolutely.
How do we prevent that in command and control type decisions?
Actually, it's quite difficult. And one of the reasons for that is because the commanders, the decision makers, keep asking for more and more information. Therefore, what you need to do is set up a decision-making system for that decision maker so that they are able to understand much better than they would otherwise what all this information is that's coming into them from various types of sensors, reports from subordinate units, commands coming down from superior officers, etc.
So since I mentioned your class, I will put this a little bit out of order before we talk about your faculty, but let's talk about that class first, because it's kind of a special class on campus. Tell us how you challenge the students and what they do.
Well, it's really a capstone class in the sense that it occurs very close to the end of the student's curriculum, the program that they're in. The students who populate the class currently come from two different curricula. One is our joint C4I systems curriculum, and that means joint command, control, communications, and computers and intelligence, JC4I. That curriculum, and students from our network operations and technology curriculum. So these students have a reasonably technical background. There are a couple of courses in each of those currics that are taught by our colleagues over in the electrical engineering department, and a couple that are taught by our colleagues in the computer science department. But it's sort of our job to help the students put that together in a framework so that they can better understand real command and control problems and how they can address those command and control problems. And since it's at the end of the curricula, what I'm able to do is call upon that technical knowledge that the students have learned in prior courses and sort of put it to work. So what I've been doing over the last few years with assistance from you and others such as Wayne Hughes is set a scenario for the students and pose a hard question for them so that they have to think through what all the implications are of that particular scenario and what that scenario implies not only in the naval forces that they have available to address any sort of threat that's in the scenario, but also what sorts of technologies they might need to address this, because we typically set the scenario several years in the future. For example, this year and last year it was 2030. So that means that they can assume, as long as the faculty instructor lets them assume, they can assume that they will have certain capabilities that are available in 2030. And the real challenge for them is, okay, if we have this capability, how are we going to use it in this scenario?
Fantastic. Well, let's go back. The way you described information science, it almost deals everything from electrons to human perception.
Absolutely.
And because of that, your faculty must be highly interdisciplinary. So talk a little bit about that special faculty we have.
They are. If we start with the human, the commander, if you will, the decision maker, we've got faculty members who are experienced in cognition, sort of a cognitive sciences perspective. We've got faculty members who are experienced in organizational structures. Just a little aside, whenever I teach an introductory course in command and control, I always tell the students that there's really three components of command and control systems. There's the organizational structure. There are the processes that the organization uses to move information around and provide information to the decision maker. And then there's the technology. And all of those three have to be matched. And by the way, I give this lecture in my capstone course too. And the point is you can trade off across those three to improve the decision making of the organization. So we've got organizational folks, we've got computer networking experts, we've got system engineers, because that's an important element of how we approach problems.
To put those together in a
system. To put those three elements together in the way that makes most sense. So it's really an integration problem.
Well, tell us a little bit about your faculty's research. What do they do then?
We've got, I mentioned mesh networks before.
Right, mesh networking.
We've got some faculty who are real experts in what we call field experimentation at NPS. NPS got into the field experimentation business about 15 years ago based upon a request from the U.S. Special Operations Command.
Right.
And what we've done is we've been able to carve out a niche. Our field experiments tend to occur at Camp Roberts, which is a California Army National Guard base about 2 hours south of Monterey. We've got a runway out there where we can operate unmanned aerial systems. We have operated a number of other unmanned systems down there, and the whole idea is that you take these platforms, put sensors on them, put communications nodes on them, and start to have them communicate with each other. And of course, if unmanned ground system goes over the horizon on the other side of the hill, it can't communicate with the network,
right.
But when it comes back, it can. And you want that to be seamless.
Right.
So that's the whole idea behind mesh networks.
And that also allows us to put tactical scenarios and apply these things to tactical concepts to see if they actually work. So you get the students out of the classroom, which they appreciate, and the faculty at times.
They all do.
They get the sunshine, that's right. Well, besides the field experimentation program and MET-NESH work, what other type of research is done in information science?
Well, actually, we have some folks who are experts in the costing and analysis of information systems writ broadly. That particular team has come up with ways to really evaluate how you compare revenues that are flowing in. We don't necessarily have that problem in the federal government, but there's a way to approach it with the costs and put them on an equivalent basis so that the decision makers can really come up with a way to evaluate return on investment of buying this particular command and control system or whatnot.
Well, I'm sure we could continue this discussion for some time. We only have a couple of minutes left, though. And I want to talk about one of the other many hats that you've worn at NPS, which is you're the chair of our cyber academic group.
Yes.
As interdisciplinary as information science. So tell us a little bit about that group, what it was stood up for, and what kind of education programs we have.
The cyber academic group really was put together to provide faculty support for a particular curriculum which was started a number of years ago, about 7 or 8 years ago. And that curriculum name is Cyber Systems and Operations. We have faculty in the cyber academic group who are affiliated with the cyber academic group who have an administrative home elsewhere on campus, but who are so interested in the Cyber Systems and Operations curriculum that they really affiliate with us.
Right.
My job as chair, the chair, by the way, rotates among the computer science department, the electrical and computer engineering department, and the information sciences department, because we are the three that have the primary responsibility for that curriculum. And my job is just to facilitate passing information to and from those faculty who are really interested in cyber systems and operations, pushing them in the direction of doing research in an area, especially if I can talk with some of the Navy leaders and get some funding to come to NPS to focus on a particular cyber problem. I will try to engage those faculty that I think might be interested in that.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Dan Boger, I think we've just about run out of time, and we have all kinds of other things we wanted to talk about, like how we put your students to work, where they go in the future. We'll have to have you back on the show at another time. Thank you very much for being a guest on the YourTown television program.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
And thank you for joining us in this segment of the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation-sponsored segment of the YourTown television program, where we highlight interesting faculty and students and what we're doing around your town.